consciousness and what is the proof that it even exists? The proof is inherent within the question. The very question itself is lit up by consciousness. It's not an object that can be found in the world, but more of a no thing that can be realized. Because every single idea of what consciousness is or isn't, every single experience takes place within consciousness. Literally, the very search itself takes place within consciousness. So where better to look than in your own direct experience? But isn't consciousness just an idea? Well, yes and no, not at all. Yes, insofar as everything you think about it is an idea of it. And no, in that you have an innate knowing that you are aware of experience taking place. This awareness, aka consciousness in this context, is apparent whether you give it a label, a name or not. Stay tuned for part 2. There are no individual consciousnesses either. It's because we all share the same consciousness that we perceive the same world, albeit from different perspectives as expressions of consciousness that are more limited as they are expressions of consciousness, or I could say movement within consciousness, who as expressions of the same source have taken on the same identity, I, which relates to the simple truth that is existence. Although, due to being expressions of consciousness, very often mistake their true identity to be that which they say after the words, I am. You will naturally believe you have a separate consciousness if you take your so-called inner psychological world to be consciousness itself. But that is not what is meant by consciousness in its purest, ancient meaning. As your very awareness of your so-called inner world comes and goes, appears and disappears. Like in deep sleep, for example, you have no conscious thought then. But it doesn't mean consciousness disappeared too, just the appearance within it did. Just as the light in a light bulb can disappear but the light bulb itself remains. Consciousness is the layer of the self that you will not be able to get to with mind, because as soon as you try, mind aka thought dissolves back into the background of itself, which is consciousness. Go on, try to think of what is behind your thoughts or where your thoughts arise from. I'll wait. Notice how your mind became quiet and still? You cannot find consciousness with thought or with the senses because consciousness is all experience. Consciousness can appear as a thought whilst still being the background of it. You simply cannot separate thought from consciousness. Just as you cannot separate any experience from consciousness because consciousness is experience. What would an experience minus consciousness even look like? Well, whatever you may say, consciousness would have to be present for that experience too. I'll see you in part 3. Thank you. Part 4. It's said that, and you may have heard myself say before, that all is consciousness because you simply cannot separate the so-called physical universe or experience itself from consciousness. But you can and do experience the lack of the universe, the absence of physicality, such as in or with or rather as consciousness in so-called deep sleep when there are no dreams. Did you dream last night? I mean, how else would you know that you did or didn't dream last night if you didn't exist as this pure conscious background that is aware of both phenomenal and non-phenomenal experience to be able to confirm that? Consciousness is absolute and proves itself to be absolute by itself as itself. All ideas of what truth is, including the universe itself, appears to consciousness. And as I said before, you cannot separate experience from consciousness, so all is consciousness. You literally have to believe that consciousness isn't absolute. But that too is a belief within consciousness.